Hi, and welcome to Second Rate Film School. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Jake.
And here today we are talking about the new The Batman movie. Jake didn't really like it, I think. No, so we're talking about The Batman today, and we're going to give our thoughts and opinions on it. Yeah, so let's dive in. Do you want to start?
You can. It's your show.
Okay. Way to shirk responsibility. I fucking love this. I personally put this in my now top three Batman movies with Dark Knight and Batman '89. I think it takes elements from both of those and really puts it in a kind of almost hybrid between those two movies to really capture, I think, possibly one of the best adaptations of just the straight up detective Batman ever. We'll get into it more in the spoiler section, but yeah, there's a lot that I love here that combines elements from both of those movies, and weaknesses from both of those movies have been taken out, in my opinion. I mean, there's some flaws in this, but we'll get into that as well. But yeah, all around, love it. Solid movie.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love the movie too. I just saw the movie for a second time last night, so that might tell you how much I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more the second time. But I think all around, it's definitely one of the best Batman movies. But, has some flaws and everything. It doesn't do a whole lot totally new in terms of the core of the film, but I think for what it is, it's a great fucking movie. It really is, and it still packages it in such a way where it's very satisfying, and it's a great Batman story, and Robert Pattinson is just a terrific Batman. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to see, supposedly they said him and Matt Reeves want to do like a whole trilogy of Batman movies, and we'll go into, I guess, at the end, where we can see the future of the series going. But yeah, no, I really loved it, and for context also, every night leading up to the movie's release, me and Jake were watching a different Batman movie. So we watched Adam West Batman, the Tim Burton and Schumacher Batmans, Mask of the Phantasm, Return of the Joker, and then the Nolan trilogy. So we got a lot of Batman into us in 2 weeks. So that I think will help provide a little more context for our feelings as we go on, because it's been quite a while since I've watched those movies. So, they're all fresh in my mind. But I think it's one of the strongest Batman movies in a very long time.
Yeah, and that's saying something, especially after the Nolan films. Yeah, I'll just say that Matt Reeves has respectfully carved out his own part of the Batman mythos with this film. It's very much a worthy successor to the Nolan films.
Agreed.
Yep, can't wait to see what he does next.
Yeah. All right, so I guess that's our spoiler-free section. I know it's short and sweet, but I don't want to do a lot of editing on this one. So if you want to hear our wrap-up section and don't want to hear spoilers, skip to the 54 minutes and 54 seconds. And join us there. What I really loved about this one is just like how simplistic it is. I mean, we talk about like the Nolan movies being like, and at the time they were the most grounded of the Batman movies we'd seen. There's no dehydrating the World UN Council like in the '60s one. There's no, like gas that makes you see your fears and vaporizing water like in the Batman Begins, or a fucking nuke in Dark Knight Rises, and all the weird shit the Schumacher Burton movies got. It's just the Riddler's a fucked up serial killer, and crumbling infrastructure is the biggest danger in this city, and I fucking love that.
So, yeah, I'll just stress that fundamentally, I don't think this film does anything particularly groundbreaking with the character, but it's a great remix of some of the things that have come before, but done in the most optimal way possible. I can appreciate the fact that even though it is like another Gotham is Corrupt story, I appreciated the journey of Bruce getting to that, where he is this young Batman who's very myopic, doesn't have everything figured out yet, where he's just fighting on a street level. He isn't thinking about an institutional level where, it's more at the top. Because if you've seen a Batman film, and if you're a Batman fan, or, it's not, again, particularly groundbreaking, the solution. It's just how it gets there is very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed it, especially since this is such like a point of view driven Batman who doesn't quite see it all yet. A very well executed mystery, where more in the structure of all the President's Men sort of thing than Seven, which I was very surprised about, where the Riddler isn't kind of the John Doe, the monster at the end of the tunnel of it. He is more just like this kind of crazed killer who just there are catalysts to just kind of get things moving, and then it's up to Batman to figure everything out and solving the wider conspiracy of Gotham's corruption. But yeah, I just thought it was just the best possible way to execute that, despite all that. And so with a sequel, I would like to. I mean, well, I guess we'll get into more of that later, but I'd like them to push things a little more story-wise, especially after how this ends. But for what this is just a terrific Batman story that still feels very classic. And what does set this film apart that shouldn't be understated is the detective noir element, which sets itself apart from all the other Batman films. I mean, this is a detective film. This is a 3-hour slow burn noir where Batman is solving a case, and there isn't a whole lot of action scenes, and I liked how they stayed true to that. Didn't feel like an obligatory superhero movie where it had to check off all these boxes to maybe satisfy an audience. It knows what it is and it sticks to it, and little flaws in the execution, maybe leading up to, in terms of the execution of the mystery with some things. We'll go in deeper into that, but altogether just a real slam dunk, and I'd maybe personally put this maybe behind The Dark Knight and Batman Begins. So it's like a number 3 for me. Before it was, I put Batman Returns above it.
All right.
But now I think maybe I put this one above Batman. Maybe Batman Returns is objectively a little better in terms of what it sets out to do, but maybe that's a little arguable between those two.
So, but basically, we both put this as like our number 3 Batman movies. I guess is the important thing.
Subjectively, you mean?
Yes, subjectively, yeah.
It's difficult because I don't really have a favorite Batman movie, which is weird, but not to undermine what you're saying at all, because it's just it's just Batman. I get everything. I can get a little bit of everything out of him. It just depends on what the interpret. But this, I guess, comes pretty damn close to how I see Batman in my head.
Yeah. No, and that was a big thing that, if you remember, plug for older video when we did our what is the best Batman movie. At the time, I picked Batman '89, and I still have that as my personal favorite. I know objectively that Dark Knight is the best, but that's my personal one. That at the time, Batman '89 got the closest, in my opinion, to what the Batman is, because he does have that mystery solving angle in that one a little bit more, and I do like the whole he's just going around beating the shit out of criminals. Like, it doesn't always have to be like a big bad, and that's like the thing here. It's like he's just going around and beating up street crime, and then this kind of just gets like thrown in his lap. And I think an interesting point, there's not a lot of action scenes, so let's go through them really quickly. There's when he beats the shit out of Doug Walker. That was like a thing that circulated, and he even pointed out that like the one guy kind of looked like him. I don't see, it's just a bald guy with a goatee, but whatever. On Halloween, in the opening scene, then like he just keeps beating up the same Falcone like goons like several times, when he has to keep going in the club. So that's like, that happens a couple times.
There's the card chase. Well, I mean, with the penguin. With the penguin, and then the climax. But if you really think about it, those action scenes, they're more something. It's more of an extension of like the mystery of what's happening. Yeah. It's more reminiscent of like a 40s or 70s noir.
Yeah, with the exception of like the gangbangers on Halloween, which even that plays into the whole angle, as we see later on, of like people fearing him, even like the common people more. Though that was really the only isolated event. We don't see him doing too much, but I like the idea of it. I just love a lot of it, and the detective angle is something we don't see too often. I mean, I think the movie that did the detective angle, prior to this, the most was Mask of the Phantasm, at least theatrically speaking, was the closest to like just pure detective skills.
Sure, yeah. This goes even further, though. I would say that's about it. But in terms of live action, again, like you said with Batman '89. He does more of the detective work off screen. Yeah. And then in The Dark Knight, you see there's that whole sequence where he's doing the thing with the bullet with the forensics or something like that.
Which I still am not 100% sure.
I'm not either. It's cool, but it's cool to see Batman doing that. But this structurally is a detective film through and through. This is not an action film.
He needs to live up to the moniker of world's greatest detective and Detective Comics at some point, and I think we finally have that angle of Batman, which again, nothing to disrespect all the other ones that came before. It's just, this is, I think, a very refreshing view of Batman in an angle we don't often see. Because there's some extent of yeah, it's a movie. You don't want to see him like dusting for fingerprints. You want to see him beating the shit out of Nicholson or Heath Ledger or Schwarzenegger or like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are the three I'm going with this example. They're all on the same level. Uh, but no, I mean, yeah, it was just great. And like when we did get action scenes, they were fucking great. I mean, yeah, most of them were stripped down. It's just like him beating the shit out of a bunch of gangbangers and guys on top of a stadium. I mean, the fucking scene with Penguin and the fucking car chasing. I mean, we saw that in IMAX. When your fucking seat feels like like the big one could have hit LA right at that moment, and I don't know if we would have noticed. To be perfectly honest, with how fucking great that was in IMAX.
Yeah, when the Batmobile turned on, our seat shook. It was, I mean, it sounds like a jet engine. It was incredible. It was great.
See it in IMAX if you can.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, and most of them are, it's a very simplistic Batman in terms of like action, but like so well done. I don't mean simplistic in a bad way. I mean just like it's just straightforward. And I remember Kevin Smith once tried summing up the Nolan trilogy as it's almost like a noir movie where the cop just happens to wear a cape, and it's like that's true for an extent, but it's like this is like I can almost imagine if like you were making like the French Connection today, like Popeye Doyle beating the ever loving shit out of these guys with 2022 sensibilities would be kind of similar to this, and I fucking love it. Yeah, it's just a stripped down Batman. Sure, does he have body armor and some gear, but like it's far from the shit we saw in a lot of these other movies. He doesn't have a wall of monitors that are turning everyone's cell phones into like echo things. He doesn't have like the batarang that has like radar on it. It's just blunt instruments, basically.
He's a man obsessed with the mission. He's dedicated to it, and that's very Frank Miller from Year One, stuff like that, which I really enjoyed, even down to the narration, which I got very Frank Miller vibes. But I just loved all that. And of course, this has been done in some of the other films and everything, just kind of redone in a different way. I would say. Well, I guess in that sense, not.
I get it. Like it's tough to put your finger on, but like it's never been honed in on this angle so much. I mean, you had like in the Burton ones, Burton was obviously more interested in the villains in a lot of regards. Like you look at the time code of those movies, like Batman's not like really appearing until minute 20 in those types of movies. And the Nolan movies are exploring why he's Batman and all this versus like he's fucking Batman. That's like without question, and this is his mission. And as we get into like later on in the movie, you wonder like the morality of that mission. He even says at the beginning, he's like, I can't remember the exact line, but basically he says he's not even sure why he's been doing it for 2 years at this point. He doesn't know why he's doing it. That crime and murder and all that is on the rise, so he's wondering, have I been actually making a difference? But he is scaring the shit out of criminals, though.
Yep.
And as we'll get into, maybe that shouldn't be the goal necessarily. But no, yeah, everything about this movie I just fucking loved. I did love the look to it. It seemed like a hybrid between the Burton Schumacher universes, where it's like kind of stylized, where people were dressing like the 1950s and all that, and then the Nolan ones, which were obviously contemporaneous. It was obviously early aughts to 2010s. But this one, like just like looking at it, and I know it comes from obviously most of the locations. It's like it's old government buildings that were like built like in the almost like they look like 50s, but almost kind of like an 80s look to them. Like it was tough for me to put my finger on it.
It's like a 90s look. Kinda. Even with the police cars, they looked like police cars out of the 90s, and some of the clothes too looked like early 80s sort of thing.
Yeah.
Did you get that sense?
A little. That I was trying to put my finger on it. That is like if you made a Batman movie stylized to be the 80s. It kind of almost reminded me like a little of like Watchmen. I know that was
really?
That was obviously set like a little earlier. Or when was Watchmen set?
85.
Okay, 85. Okay, so but like just kind of like the color palette and all that, where it's like it's the buildings are physically older than like the 80s and all that, but like you get like the kind of idea of like almost I hear this grungy New York in the 80s. Like when you watch a documentary about like Son of Sam from like New York in the 70s and like shit where it's like the city of Gotham is past its glory day, and that goes into the whole Operation or Project Renewal that of Thomas Wayne's and all that. It's a city past its prime. It's physically crumbling and all that. And that's like the backdrop for the climax when Riddler just fucking floods the goddamn city. The biggest villain in this movie is crumbling infrastructure, basically. And how quickly shit goes down. But yeah, no, I just love the way it looks. I have to say this might be my favorite Batcave ever because
Yeah.
I really like because obviously it's always been in a cave, and traditionally speaking, it's been under Wayne Manor. In the Nolan movies, he had that. In the latter two, he did have that weird like void under the shipping containers when Wayne Manor was being rebuilt, which was cool. But yeah, I like the fact that he's like in like an abandoned like subway stop. And I've always loved the Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters too. So I've loved the vintage like turn of the century New York subways. Like art like architecture, not even Art Deco. It's like pre-Art Deco, like 1900s style look to it. I thought it was cool that it's like, oh yeah, he's not in Wayne Manor anymore. He's like in Wayne Tower, which plays into the whole Riddler's angle of like you were literally looking down on us all these years. And it's just a all around great look. Love the look to the Batmobile. I mean, outside really the 60s Batman and 89 and Batman Returns design, I've never really cared for too many of the iterations of the Batmobile, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the Nolan verse, I mean, it makes sense. It's like a tank. It was supposed to be for the military. It does look cool. Like the Schumacher ones to an extent, but like this might be one of my favorite interpretations of the Batmobile, like of this like what looks like almost like a Dodge Charger fucking
Challenger.
or Challenger fucking just with a jet engine on the back of it. It's like, this is great. It's stripped down, but it's still cool as shit.
Well, that, like you were talking about, that's kind of hones in on that vision of Batman more to the extent of his to DIY Batman.
Yeah.
He put this together himself. I love it. I love that car. Did you notice the way that when it scared Penguin when it was turning on, it was kind of like that film Christine, the John Carpenter film.
Yeah.
The way how it was lit up. I think that was like an intentional homage there, but that was. I love the way it sounded. I just loved how it was just like a car. Just Bruce put this together himself. Just makes him a lot more obsessed how he just took this car and
made it a killing machine.
Made it just this horrifying thing. I loved it.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's the thing. It's like we all love the vehicles and all that, but it's like it is a little like we were watching Batman Returns, obviously for this, but it's like I just like love it's like the fucking thing where it's like he puts like the pedestal down and raises the car, but just spins it around. It's like all this like gimmicky shit that's like, okay, what scenarios is he using this in? Like it's really over engineered in a sense, and it's just like Robert Hansen's like, no, I need to make this go as fast as possible and withstand anything that I could crash through like 100 cars and still be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, both serve their different.
No, I know.
For their,
yeah,
I know it's not a criticism, but I do love the Burton Batmobile for it, and I kind of love that kind of James Bondian sort of.
Yeah.
I have this just thing in my utility belt for whatever use. That's like part of the comic booky fun nature, but this is just a different thing.
Yeah.
Where
it's one purpose is I have to get around fast.
It's utilitarian. Yeah. It's very stripped down
and he barely uses it in the movie.
It's only like that one scene.
He uses it one more. Doesn't he use it one more time?
Just it's in the car chase scene and when he's trying to race to Wayne Tower to get to Alfred. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Okay, so yeah, it's technically used in one night then. And yeah, he's just like most of the time just going around on a fucking regular, not a bat motorcycle or anything like that. It's just he just has a black motorcycle, and it just has the bat like gear in like a backpack. Which I don't know if that body armor could fold down in a backpack necessarily, but you know what, I'll accept it. But yeah, that's like what I was saying in that Batman video. I just like the idea of a Batman like he parks the Batmobile somewhere and just is going around patrolling, beating the ever-loving shit out of criminals. Might be a little overkill to have body armor, but as you see, those guys did try and shoot him a bunch of times. Yeah, no, it's great. I think the mystery's great. And I think maybe we should talk about the other cast members. Zoe Kravitz is a great Catwoman.
She's terrific.
Yeah.
She's less a Catwoman in this movie, more just kind of a desperate woman trying to get out of a bad situation, like this femme fatale. But she's so good. There's times where she's still like very much Selena Kyle Catwoman, where walked right out of the comics for me, and she's just terrific. I think Michelle Pfeiffer's still like the best Catwoman. I guess maybe apples and oranges, but yeah. Zoe Kravitz was terrific. I really loved her, and I loved the whole relationship with Pattinson's Batman. They have very good chemistry.
Yeah, and I think also, this comes down to it's the stripped down Batman. So they keep saying the Batman and the Riddler over and over again because that's like what the media has denoted them. They say the Penguin once or twice, but they mostly refer to him as Cobblepot and Oz.
They say Penguin quite a few times.
They say quite
actually.
a few times?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was less. But yeah, they never call her the Catwoman or whatever. And I think that could be for a sequel, like if she's like really like getting involved in like the cat burglary. I know like we see that she has stolen shit and all that, and whatnot. But like I feel like these are like in universe are supposed to be the nicknames the press is giving. It's almost like the Spider-Man movies where they don't give themselves the name. It's the fucking other people. So in Spider-Man case it's Bruce Campbell, and every other case it's J. Jonah Jameson. It feels like Gotham Times is giving all of them their name. So maybe in the sequel she'll be denoted as Catwoman because she seems almost like just a petty thief at this point. That's not like really well known.
Yeah, she's just really trying to. Yeah. She's trying to find her friend.
Yeah, and then avenge the murder.
And then get out of town. I mean, that's really the femme fatale sort of thing. And one of the influences of this movie was the film Clute with Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland. And Matt Reeves was not kidding with the influence because the first core of the movie where Batman is working with Selina, very Clute, and it's just fantastic and everything. And
she's just all around great. And then all the other people, Colin Farrell, who I didn't realize I was supposed to him for a very long time, is the Penguin.
Yep.
What's his name?
Paul Dano.
Paul Dano as the Riddler. Jeffrey Wright is Gordon.
John Turturro is Carmine Falcone, I guess is pronounced in this movie, even though in Batman Begins they pronounce it as Falcone, so I guess I don't know what the proper...
Yeah, I've only heard it in these two movies, and I think Gotham had him in it briefly. It was Moroni was more of the crime boss in that one, so I've long since forgotten. And that we probably shouldn't also mention Gotham even in the same sentence as this, so I apologize.
But he was great.
And then Andy Serkis as Alfred.
Yeah, very different. He's only in like 4 scenes, but I kind of like this relationship was very cold, and it was not the warm fatherly relationship like the other movies or like the Nolan films or just the butler. He's kind of like a more failed father figure where he kind of regrets this guy going down this path, and he failed at a certain point when he could have done more. So that was very interesting. I'd like to see more in the sequel to see how that relationship develops now that maybe they've mended things. But just the casting is very specific, where I will say probably the most realistic performances I've seen in a Batman movie, to a certain extent, I would say. More than the Nolan films, which I'm kind of surprised. I don't know, it just all felt very, very lived in and very believable and more and less heightened.
Yeah, I mean, because that was the thing. Like, the Nolan movies we used to say were the most realistic, minus the fucking nuke. But, like, yeah, like, everyone's giving, like, big, grandiose speeches throughout it at times, which obviously needs to fit the plot or whatever and your ethos of it. But, this one, outside, like, the narration, like, they don't give too many preachy speeches in this. It's just, like, everything's in service of the plot, and it's tight dialogue, and it feels like if you take out the bat suit and all that, this is just like a private investigator who's looking at this, who's a little too obsessed.
It feels very much like a 70s neo-noir or a 40s, because there are times where Batman, he's saying dialogue like a 40s detective would say, like who's the mustache with the broken nose, and when Selina is trying to kill that Kenzie corrupt cop, and she says, oh no, when she's trying to kill Falcone, she says he has to pay, and Batman says you don't have to pay with him. That's just a great noir line. Just stuff like that.
It also balanced the humor pretty well, because I was like wondering, because it's like, I love the humor in like the Nolan movies and the Burton and Schumacher movies to an extent in those latter two, but at times it does feel a little out of place. But like in here, I think they sprinkle in the right way. So like I think my favorite joke line is at one point Batman is captured, and like Gordon, who has like obviously the relationship with him, is like trying to talk him back, and like everyone wants to just like, okay, he's here in police custody, we're gonna take his fucking mask off. They're trying to railroad him for killing Peter which Skarsgård was that? Stellan?
Peter Skarsgård.
Yeah, I can never keep them track. When he kills Peter Skarsgård dies, and they try and blame him, which I mean, really, we're gonna blame him. He didn't put the bomb in the neck, but whatever. And Jeffrey Wright is like, okay, listen, you're gonna go this way, this way, this way, and punch me to make it look realistic. And then he punches him, and then they like meet at the rendezvous spot. He's like, you could have pulled the punch, and it's like that's just like, it's a funny line, but it's realistic. It's like, did you really need to hit me that hard?
Yeah, it's very. There's levity, but in the right place, and it's situational because it's true to the characters. It's not shoved in forced humor for its own sake, or like these quips like the Marvel films, which are just so incessant and get so annoying. It was refreshing to see that, like the thumb drive, like that very deadpan, like it was just very perfect within the scene, and that's very much like a Batman sort of gallows sense of humor that he has.
I also love in that scene also when all the letters are sent off to the news from Gordon. So he's like, oh, I'm gonna catch hell for that, and nothing comes from it. Like it's not. Like I thought, oh, it's not gonna be a plot point. No, he's just like, oh, that's not gonna be good for me tomorrow morning. Like he's like, no good will come from that. Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. I mean, I think the most comedic moment, but it still feels realistic to where this Batman is when he escapes the GCPD and, like, is parachuting down and gets, like, clotheslined, basically, on the bridge. And, like, I audibly went, oof, like, when that happened.
Yeah.
But, like, it's like, hey, he's not the Batman we all know yet. He's still, even though he's been doing this for 2 years, is still learning. But, yeah, no, It went in the right way, and then... Oh, actually, no, I think I changed my funniest moment is when Penguin is... Am I the only one who knows the difference between L and La?
No habla español.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, well, that kind of goes into, like, the riddles and the mystery of the movie and everything. I thought were very well done, where it's the classic detective sees everything right in front of him, but doesn't until it's recontextualized. I mean, that is part of my flaws of some of the movie in terms of, like, the execution of some of the mystery. I think on the second viewing, I think they could have set up things a little better in terms of showing us some things, like the what is it called? Not the dam, but the thing that separates it, the seawall.
Yeah, seawall levee, I think.
Yeah, let's just call it the seawall for now. I think they mention it once earlier in the movie, and that's really it. And then it gets blown up in the climax. But I kind of wish that was more integrated in the plot in some way, not like specifically, but maybe visually, like maybe Batman's driving. And you see more of like the seawall
and like it's a stormy night, water splashing over it a little bit.
Yeah, or maybe if you want to tie it in to because it's you can tie it into like the Riddler psychologically, where maybe the orphanage from the renewal program, maybe that was like on the outskirts of the city. Maybe it's like been partly drowned. It's like over like the seawall.
Yeah.
And Batman and Gordon go there, and it's kind of flooded. They have to navigate it a little bit. Just something like that kind of just makes us remember that.
And that would also contextualize because the orphanage was supposed to be Wayne Manor, which when they built Wayne Tower, they're like, oh, we're generous, we're donating our ancestral home and all that. So, I mean, obviously, no, that was a connection between Batman, or Bruce Wayne, technically, and the Riddler. But, that could have been like a thing where it's like, oh, yeah, your charitable thing was giving us a bunch of swampland that was going to get worse and worse. And it is interesting to see the... Thomas Wayne being like a shithead almost, like not like the goody person we've seen in all the other movies. I know like in the Joker it's much more overt. I mean with this it's a little more shades of gray because he's not actively like kill this person for me, but it's like he's still like working with the mob in a sense. He feels guilt from what we hear that that reporter was killed, that's not what he intended, but at the same time, you're going to fucking Al Capone, basically. Who only knows how to do things one way. When you met him, you're digging bullets out of him, so he didn't have to go to the hospital to deal with that. Yeah, like he's still a shady person in a sense.
Yes,
he's a morally complicated person, and I did enjoy seeing that confronts Bruce's whole "I'm doing this for my father."
To go from black and white to learn more about the shades of gray of things. That's the way. I wish it was integrated a little more. I think the problem was with that. It's kind of an exposition dump with the Arkhams and the Waynes and the whole Martha thing. I wish that was kind of set up a little more earlier in the movie. And
also show, like, don't tell. Like, I would have liked to see a little more flashbacks. Like, I know the movie's, like, 3 hours long, but, like, you could have trimmed some stuff somewhere to give us, like, 15 minutes maybe here.
There's some backstory in it where it's, like, noir, where a lot of things happen off screen. You gotta kind of... the only way you can do that is through expositional dialogue, but I think I was mostly okay with that. It just... maybe needed a little restructuring with certain things, especially I think the Thomas Wayne thing, because you go from, my father ordered a hit out on this reporter to,
no,
Albert saying, oh no, not really. It was a little more. It was a little too linear and straightforward. Usually with a detective story, something like that, especially so personal.
Yeah,
It's like serves as like the crux to Bruce's arc, where you might want to structure that a little better into the movie. Somehow I can't, I don't know now at the top of my head, but that was really the only real qualm I had with that.
yeah,
And sometimes information is kind of given to us, like the revelations where um, revelation are just new information given to us. Where with usually like a detective film, the revelations or the new information is recontextualized information from what we already knew, and they do that in the movie quite a few times, doing well. But sometimes they miss the mark a little bit, but not just fumbled it a little bit. But really, it's not this.
and not enough to derail it by any
No,
means.
it's still a solid mystery. And again, even though they're investigating just the corruption of Gotham, I did enjoy the solution was almost like this quaint Falcone is running the city and he killed this girl who knew the information, and I can appreciate that actually. I think that's kind of interesting. It's not Batman has to save the city from this doomsday device or something like that. It's
Yeah.
I think that's like a neat little thing. Next time in the sequel though, hopefully they push things a little more with that. But I think for a more myopic Batman who's just not looking at the systemic problems, it works for this.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about it like, in the end of the day, obviously, the Riddler's plan was to flood the city, kill God knows how many people like that, and then have his like sniper friends pick him off. But like, you have to wonder almost if Batman were not involved, realistically, how many more like I don't think was going to try and kill any more people in the Riddle sense. You wonder like what the plan would have been if Batman wasn't involved or it was like a shitty detective. I mean, I jokingly point out that like all of his photos of like the mayor and the DA coming out of the club, like they should have been like, hey, where the fuck are the photos being taken from? But no, like had they not been involved, like how was he planning on getting caught, or was he just gonna blow shit up?
I think he
It's
was.
it's just a small scale.
Yeah.
He would have just gone up to the hills himself or whatever, or taken part in the sniping. No, it's just like a small scale thing where it's like, yeah, a lot of people obviously died in the flooding thing, presumably, and all that. But at the same time, this wasn't everyone's going to go batshit, no pun intended, insane from like this, fear toxin or Smilex or Nuke or whatever. It's the most like small scale live action Batman we've ever seen.
Yeah, it's all the president's men. It's outing this guy in the and I actually like the little detail of thematically it was cool where the guy who they out is the recluse,
Yeah.
like Bruce. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. You're gonna bring him out into the light. You'll find out where I am. That's why, again, like you said with the whole like picture thing. Again, it's a classic detective. Like, why didn't I notice that before? That's where it really works in the movie. Where I understand this now because of what I know now. It's recontextualized, and that's where it really worked.
Yeah.
I thought, and it helps Bruce's arc so well. I really, yeah, because like the people he brings down, like Falcone and Riddler, are like they're like the worst parts of him, the parts that are wrong with him that he hasn't quite figured out during the movie, but the arc kind of brings him to that point where that's how he improves himself. Where because Riddler is mistaken where he thinks Batman is just like him and he wanted him to join him in this, but then Batman sees like, no, I'm not like you at all, and
Yeah.
in like the guy at the very end where he said I'm vengeance, that like puts everything into perspective for
Yeah.
Bruce.
And that actually is my like only real major criticism, and I know you guys when we were discussing this after the movie, seeing it together, disagree with me, but yeah, my only real problem is I feel like I get what the whole ethos of the movie was supposed to be, that Batman, and I think we forget that as fans of Batman movies and Batman in general. Yes, he does need to strike fear into criminals' hearts, but he also needs to inspire hope, and that was the whole point of Dark Knight Rises, was at the end that he's like, okay, I no longer need to be the Batman. Gotham is in a place that it no longer needs me, type thing, and that was the whole Nolan movies. Where here, up until like the very end, I wasn't like kind of aware that we were trying to set up that like people, like average citizens, were really scared shitless out of Batman. I mean, you saw a little bit at the beginning when he's beating up the gang bangers on Halloween. The guy who he saves is like, please don't hurt me. Like he just thinks this is another criminal who's gonna beat the shit out of him now too. And then at the very end, we get the I am vengeance, and then when he helps like the people in the wreckage, they're a little unsure. And I get that's the whole. It's gonna be setting up that he's got to kind of strike the balance between scaring the shit out of everyone and inspiring hope. Because I think like when I say we kind of forget this as fans of Batman. We know Batman. We follow Batman in these movies. We know the reason why he does this. We know he's a good guy and all that. But if we take this from the angle of people who've never heard of Batman or are living in the city, it's like, yeah, a giant guy in a giant fucking bat suit and cape driving around a car with a rocket engine in it, beating the living shit out of petty criminals, probably would scare a lot of people. People wouldn't think, oh, he's a superhero. They're like, oh, this man is a lunatic and he is going to hurt us. And that's why you can see where like the Riddler and these criminals think, oh, we're similar. So in this sense with the Riddler, and this is where I'm saying I think they need to set it up a little bit more, is he could be like, we're the same. We're getting rid of terrible people. Like, okay, fine. Like I can't physically beat them up. I'm not like, chiseled out of stone like you are. Like, I can't beat anyone up, but I expose them. He's like, is there any difference between you beating somebody into a bloody pulp and me, like just shooting them? It's like, and all that. And it's like, that would have been an interesting dichotomy that we really haven't seen too much in the Batman movies. Like, we all know as the audience, no, there's a big difference between Michael Keaton Batman and Nicholson Joker. We know there's a big difference between Bale's Batman and Heath Ledger's Joker, and so forth and so on. But I think that's my only small still pick in it that I wish they could have highlighted more, that like the police really fucking distrust him, that the civilians really fucking are afraid of him, type thing.
Yeah, well, like I said, I disagree. I think it's conveyed well in that opening scene and how the police treat him.
I mean, the police really, outside of like the Schumacher movies, never have treated, and the like Adam West movies never really treated him that well. I mean, I always kind of felt it was like a little weird of a stretch that like the bat signal was in like the Nolan movies. Like, I know they have the throwaway joke like, oh, it's just faulty equipment, officer, and all that, don't worry about it, type thing. But like at the same time, it's like, okay, no, like he's a vigilante in all these movies. Would the cops necessarily want to work with him? So it didn't feel too different than like how the cops viewed him in Batman Begins or Batman '89.
No,
and all that. So
no, you're right.
So I feel like we just needed civilians. Like, that could have been like part of the debate a little bit more. Like when you see the debate between the mayor who was killed and then the incoming mayor, like really going on like the ethics of this, like like even just a little bit here and there, I would have been more fine with. Like, nothing major. We don't need to rewrite the movie, but just certain parts of it, I think, would have been more beneficial. But that's really my only main flaw, and even then, it's still a fucking great movie without it.
No, and one thing I just want to say, the one thing that kind of made me raise an eyebrow. Look, okay, so I went in this movie kind of expecting a certain movie than what we got. I was expecting something more of like The Dark Knight, a little more, something more newer to say about for something like, more of a serial killer detective film. I thought they were going to say something a little more kind of original and fresh than just Gotham is corrupt, which is fine. I'm glad. I don't mind that. It was well executed for what it was. But the one thing that kind of made me raise an eyebrow was, from what I saw in the advertising when Riddler floods the city, I thought it was going to devolve into like schlock, where Batman and Catwoman were going to team up and they were going to go around the city and they had to like save all the citizens from like the Riddler's goons and everything. It was going to be like this real schlocky thing, but it was just, I was pleasantly surprised.
The last 15 minutes of the movie, and it's treated like Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, but it's done in a more personal way, where the action just takes place at this stadium, or
the Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, essentially, but up in the rafters, where just Batman has to thwart this assassination attempt against the mayor-elect, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Because by that point, I mean, I think that worked really well, actually, where his arc is culminated, and that moment when he crashed through the ceiling and he takes out all the guys, he just goes full-on Batman. That's classic Batman.
Yeah, it's great. I also love this shows you people overthink things, I think, a little too much, because I love it in there, like when he's like bleeding out, but he's got to save Selena and all that, so he like
Yeah.
injects like adrenaline
Yeah.
basically to him. But like people are like, it's green. Do you think that's the
Oh,
stuff for
jeez.
Bane? And it's like, no, I don't think this gritty
No.
movie is going to do Bane unless their version of Bane is he's just like on fucking steroids constantly. And even that, I don't think they're gonna do that.
I mean, I could see them in this world fitting Bane, but I don't think they're going to use Bane either because he was already used in the.
Yeah, I just don't think like people are overthinking it. Like,
Oh,
you see,
yeah,
to have
yeah.
a vial to show there's something in it.
No, that's
make it green, like whatever. It's like it's adrenaline.
It-
He just like injected like 100 cc's of adrenaline that might stop his heart. We're not sure, but like
I
his
love
thing is
that.
I gotta fucking do this thing.
I love that scene. Just the fact that Batman has adrenaline is just in his like one of his.
And also a port for it in his suit that he
I know.
planned for this. It's like, okay, I gotta be able to inject adrenaline into my body.
No, of course you'd have to plan for that. Like,
No, but it's just like something you never see in
No.
a superhero movie. It's like he acknowledges the weaknesses of the human body and like how much pain he can take at a certain point.
Yeah.
He's like, I might have to take adrenaline.
yeah, I mean he took that shotgun blast pretty well, all things considering. But that was terrific. Just
Yeah.
and just I loved just the climax. It was like the end of like a John Frankenheimer film, like
Yeah.
The Manchurian Candidate or like The Parallax View. It reminded me of a little bit. Just terrific. Really like it ended like a thriller where Batman just using all his resources at his disposal to take out like 50 of these Riddler assassins. It was
great.
amazing.
Now, before we wrap up, one thing I wonder, and we can talk a little bit about sequels, and I'll start with mine. Flooded City, and they're talking about how terrible it is and whatnot. And, like, Batman's narration is, it's going to be sending people scrambling for power, and it shows the Penguin and whatnot. And I can't remember, like, all the narration. Do you think they're going to try and do No Man's Land with this? That, like, they're going to try and do a more realistic, like, this government, it goes in with, like, Project Renewal, that whole thing, its money was being siphoned from it, so, like, the federal government is like, oh, well, you just use Project Renewal, and we'll, like, help with what you can't, and, like, it's just, it's going to be a more thing of, it's not the U.S. government declaring Gotham no longer part of America. It's just going to be like, oh, red tape and just us trying to figure out where the fuck the money went. Like, it's slowing the progress of rebuilding.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. It's Gotham City. Nothing really changes, which we allude to at the end of the movie.
Yeah. It'd be cool to see, like, a partially flooded Gotham still. Like,
That would be.
They're building dams in between, like, blocks and shit like that, so it could be, like, the haves and have-nots. So, like, they rebuilt the rich part of the city first. And, like, the poor slums, like, you have to see, like, the people who lived on, like, the bottom floors of apartment buildings now have to sleep in, like, or on the rooftops. Now people are going around in fucking boats.
But now, hopefully, maybe, like, Bruce, now that he's, like, coming out as Bruce Wayne and he's more outgoing, he's probably, hopefully, done a lot more philanthropy and helping out a lot of these people. And that could be pretty interesting. And with the flooding and everything, I mean, I know this might sound laughable, but I think you could do Mr. Freeze and like a flooded city with that guy. That could be kind of interesting. I'm not saying you could do like the freezing gun, but I think Matt Reeves has also like alluded to Mr. He's not saying he would use him, but he's saying like, okay, he's an interesting character. How would that be done in this world? And just to switch it up, I think using him would be pretty cool.
When you see like Matt Reeves, even though I love Batman Returns and like Batman Forever, it's nice seeing like the redeemed versions of Riddler, who was only ever been played live action by like Jim Carrey in a theatrical movie, and obviously Gorshin in the 60s, which was a fucking very different portrayal. And then Penguin, loved Batman Returns, but Danny DeVito, it's like, Kevin Smith says in his counter track, he's like, I don't know what version of the Penguin they're going with. I've never seen any version of the Penguin, just like a sex maniac, so it's like interesting to see the gangster Penguin, and like it's just like, he's a fucking fat guy that they gave him wears a suit, like that's all there is to it. We don't need any like weird shit to him. It's like, it's the gangster angle, so it's neat to see like, okay, here's how we're gonna do these in like really fucking good movies. And that's why I really liked about like Batman Begins and Batman or Dark Knight Rises, where it's like, hey, we're gonna take villains like Scarecrow, which have never gotten respect, and make them fucking horrifying, and fix the problems of Bane from Batman and Robin. So I guess like Mr. Freeze and like Poison Ivy are like the last of like the really big villains that haven't been either redeemed, but they haven't really been redeemed to be given like a good version, live action, theatrical at least.
Yeah, Poison Ivy though, I kind of struggle what the hell you do with her in this kind of world.
I mean, we've talked about it and stuff and all that ourselves, where it's just like you could just have it as she doesn't control plants. It's just like she's like a botanist who like has been around the world, or she's like working for someone who's been from around the world, or like X, Y, and Z. She has like access to all these like fucked up, weird, rare plants from like the fucking deepest hearts of like Africa and South America, and she's just like fucking basically poisoning people. Just like she's using like fucking hemlock and shit like that, and like. And you can even make some shit up, really. Like, as long as it seems semi-realistic. Like, I don't know if there are plants out there that can, like, increase your pheromone power so she can kind of be lightly seducing men to do what she wants, like, by using, like, a weird plant, even if it's not real. She's like, do it in a way where it's not like Batman and Robin, where they're in a trance for hours on end, but it's almost like, even though this would be way too magical, but it's like in Harry Potter where they had like the 5-second like luck potion or whatever, where it's like it's just a limited thing where it lasts long enough on men for her to be able to be like, hey, can you tell me what the access code is? Oh yeah, it's this, or and then like they shake their head, it would be shaked off from it, like where she just uses it sparingly is how I think you could do her.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it, again, I struggle to see how she'd fit here, but don't take away too much from the character, or you suck the fun out of it. She can. I know the controlling plants thing might be a bit much, but don't overthink it. I just don't want all these people to become like serial killers. Like I don't want Mr. Freeze to lock people in freezers. I think that's so fucking stupid.
Well, and that's like what I wonder. Like, how do you do a realistic version of Mr. Freeze? Is that? But I mean, again,
think you could do it.
You can. I'm just personally like wondering how, because I guess the answer is 10 years ago or 12 years ago. I wouldn't have been like, how the fuck do you do Bane like real in a Nolan movie? And okay, they were able to do it. So give Matt Reeves time. Maybe he could fucking figure it out.
I think that's an interesting. I think Mr. Freeze could work. I'm a little on the Court of Owls and like Talon. But I think if Matt Reeves did it, that could be very interesting. Like the secret cult working like the secret society within Gotham City who's been around for centuries, and seeing this guy go up against Pattinson would be kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I'd be open to that if done well. There's other characters in the comics if we're going deeper, like Rupert Thorne, who's like this corrupt bureaucrat who's also like a gangster.
That could play into this version of No Man's Land. He just keeps squandering like the FEMA funds, basically.
That's what I like. Like some guy, somebody like that Silver St. Cloud, who's like a pretty big love interest in like in the Batman lore during the Steve Englehart run, who's a pretty great character, because I think she'd work in this context in like a sequel, because she's a pretty normal and stable character, unlike a lot of the other love interests for Batman. So to see maybe like a normal, balanced woman with like paired with Pattinson's Bruce might be pretty interesting, actually, and would be an interesting contrast from Selina in this movie. And then Robin, of course, I think you could do Robin in these movies, but he'd have to be like maybe 13. You could get into that whole idea of him training this kid.
You have to do like the Tim Drake thing, like, and that could tie into the whole he feels guilty for like how like the orphans were fucked over, that like he opens up like the new and improved like Wayne Foundation orphanage, and like takes a shining to like this one kid, and like they do like he's not his official like ward like living with him full time, but it's like they could be doing where they're like, we're gonna be taking you into the workforce and apprenticeships or whatever, and that's like their workaround. Like he sees something in this kid and brings him into the fold that way.
I think you could do it where he lives with them at like Wayne Manor. Like that could be part of opening up Pattinson, where in this one he's so introverted and such a recluse, where he's finally living in Wayne Manor and he's opening up his home to this like little kid who's a lot like him. I think that would be like an interesting. That's like that's outside of his comfort zone. That would be kind of neat for him. But that might be able to work too. I'm just trying to think about it.
I just can't wait to see the Legion of Doom, though.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know they set up the Joker in that thing. Matt Reeves will do it well, but I don't want another Joker.
We've seen, for God's sake, can we just leave him alone?
Yeah, how many times have we seen Joker theatrically? We've seen Nicholson, we've seen Mark Hamill technically with Mask of the Phantasm, Heath Ledger, fucking Jared Leto, kind of, and then Joaquin Phoenix, and then kind of 5.5 with this guy who we see off camera, who's played by, what was his name again?
Oh, Barry Cogan? He's like an Irish actor.
That guy.
His last name.
So, I mean, and he'll do a good job if they do it, but, like, at the same time, it's like, it'd be like if every Spider-Man movie had to have Green Goblin in it or every Superman movie had to have Lex Luthor in it. It's like, there's, I guess they have done that in most of them, but
there's other
expanded.
There's other great villains out. Batman and Spider-Man have the greatest rogues galleries. There's so much more out there, and
I get the Joker's fun, but
even fortunately, Matt Reeves says he's unsure whether he's even going to be in the next movies. That just kind of there wasn't really sequel bait. I found out.
Yeah.
There's like a whole other thing, but that's like another discussion about the deleted scene and everything. But the point is, we don't really want the Joker in the next one. Hopefully, they go in like a newer direction. I don't want to see a cat and mouse game between Batman and the Joker, but I do enjoy the idea of Joker already existing and them having. We don't have to deal with their first meeting again. But again, let's kind of push it. Let's do something new here. And
Eggman.
Actually, I wouldn't mind Scarecrow again. I know that might sound a little crazy, but I like Scarecrow in the Nolan films. Cillian Murphy's great performance-wise, but Scarecrow himself, he's good. The guy with the bag over his head, it works and all, but I think you could really make a horrifying Scarecrow and really, like, kind of what they did with the Riddler in this movie, really kind of remake him and make him like a really great villain.
Yeah, no, I think you could do a lot, and if they're going the route, I think with No Man's Land, that could be great to just see the different criminal elements. And I know, like they say, people are going to scramble for power, and that means Penguin. But like, okay, realistically, there's going to be a lot of capos breaking off from the mafia, so he might retain the most control, but he might not retain all of the Falcone, and technically, what was the other?
Maroni?
Yeah. Breaking off from the Falcone and Maroni, as we established, is gone too. So that's two major crime families. So could Cobblepot take all that? Realistically, it's probably no. So he'll probably retain the most power, but like you could see the different capos like breaking off, and that could lead into the rise of weird fucking gangs.
That's the thing. I'd like to see a gang war that, like, maybe like you got Penguin. Maybe you can bring in Ventriloquist and Scarface. I think that's a great character. Yeah, you could do that. I would love to see just an Arkham Asylum set Batman movie.
That'd be
I hope they keep doing mysteries like in detective films. This is just, we're finally getting the world's greatest detective. In order to differentiate it, I would like to see them go further with that. But if not, that's okay too. I just wish for the best. But I would love to see like a whodunit murder mystery, like an Agatha Christie sort of story at Arkham Asylum, where maybe like the warden has been murdered and Batman's there, and maybe it takes place over one night, and then Batman has there's like all these suspects from the staff. Maybe Hugo Strange is there, maybe Jonathan Crane is a doctor there, and then there's the inmates who are also suspects. So it's like, did they get out of their cells somehow? Are they actually running the asylum?
Yeah.
And Batman has to contend with this mystery while having to survive
almost
Arkham
like
Asylum.
Shutter Island, basically.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but it's like
like I don't mean that like in a like derivative way. I mean like something like in that vein where it's like you can have that limited location and make a fucking fantastic movie.
Batman's trapped in Arkham. He's got to solve this murder mystery while also surviving Arkham and everything. I think that could be really, really fun. And he's like this Perot sort of character.
Yeah, I mean, I also like the idea of there was the animated series episode. You could fill in the name potentially, where he's trapped at Arkham and all the gang members like put him on trial.
Oh, yeah, it's the trial, the episode. Yeah.
So criminals put him on trial, and he's kind of like trying to figure out how to fucking deal with this shit, and like going into again that could continue exploring the whole how responsible is Batman for these people's like woes and all that. Could be an interesting angle of that as well.
Yeah, plus Arkham Asylum I think would fit very well for the Pattinson,
especially now that we know they're Arkhams.
Yeah.
Was that like an invention for this one, or is that a comic thing?
That's been in the recent comics where I think Jeff Johns introduced that in the Earth 1 comics where Martha's in Arkham, and there's like that whole thing with that. I'm not the biggest fan of personally, but whatever. As long as it's well done, I don't care.
I'm fine with the old families of like Gotham intertwining and all that necessarily. I mean, it's interesting. It's different than they're leaving fucking Mask of Zorro or some shit, and like the pearls get strung on the string. That's all we know about the Waynes. I'm into anything that like we're differentiating from the norm at this point. I mean, we know the origin story so much. I know there's like the inkling, like every time we have to do the new version of Spider-Man or Superman or Batman in this case, we have to show radioactive spider, Krypton blowing up or this. But it's like, I think at this point we're coming at it from the angle of the 70s or 80s or the early aughts where not everyone remembers that. Not everyone has seen that. I think there's been enough of the traditional origins that I'm fine with. Yeah, let's intertwine this to give it a new flair on it.
Sure. I mean, look, if it were up to me, I wouldn't do anything with the Waynes. I don't give a shit about the Waynes. I never really have. There's like a motivation, but that's subjective.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do it,
That
this is fine. This is fine.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up now. So if you did not want to listen to our spoiler section, welcome back, I guess. So I guess yeah, we'll just wrap things up here. Solidly recommend, I would assume, from both of us.
It's a great Batman film. It's one of the best for sure. I mean, it's the consensus seems to be like top 3 or something like that. And I would say that's fair.
Yeah. So I think in years from now, people will be debating who's the best Batman, and it will be Keaton, Bale, or Pattinson will be the upper echelon.
Yes, I'm still going back and forth between who's my favorite, right? But Pattinson is he's pretty damn. Him and Keaton, but there's stuff about Pattinson that I think he has more than Keaton does.
No, and again, it goes to what I said. This is, I think, the perfect hybrid. Like, this is the perfect in-between of the Zemeckis. This is the perfect in-between of the Burton version and the Nolan version. That, like, it takes the elements I love of Burton's movies, Batman movies with Keaton, and the elements of the Nolan movies with Bale that I love, and it puts them together in a very, very good format that I love.
Yeah, but also it's a very derivative of like the comics where we're finally doing like the detective Batman, which is an essential part of the character. He debuted in Detective Comics, and DC originally stood for Detective Comics. So I'm glad after 9 movies we're getting a detective Batman, and that shouldn't be understated. I think that's very important.
Yeah, so all around great, and well, we hope you enjoyed listening to us ramble on about the Batman, and come back some other time to listen to us talk about something else, I guess.
Go see it.
Yes. Jake saw it twice already. You should too.
I might see it again. I love the movie.
Have a good night, everybody.